Senator McPhedran.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. Senators, as an independent senator for Manitoba, I acknowledge that I come from Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. I thank the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples for allowing the Parliament of Canada to be situated on their unceded territory. Honourable colleagues, for some years now, I have been honoured to co-chair the Canadian Association of Parliamentarians for Population and Development, which focuses on how we as parliamentarians can promote and protect sexual health and reproductive rights, with the freedom to choose as the core value. Contraception is a foundational component of this Pharmacare legislation and essential to the mental and physical health of millions of people in Canada. Today, I wish to give voice to young leaders in Canada who treasure their sexual health and their reproductive rights. With kudos to Senator Pate for her skillful sponsorship of this important, life-changing bill, and to our colleagues on the Sochi Senate Committee, ably chaired by Senator Omidyar, for their careful and thorough examination of Bill C-64 on our behalf. I miss you guys. Bill C-64 is highly aspirational and should be viewed as an entry point. It is not perfect, but it is needed now, and I'm eager to vote in support to make it law in Canada. I thank my Manitoba colleague, Senator Osler, for setting out her thoughtful concerns yesterday, because I share the worry for a smooth implementation with the necessary bilateral funding negotiations that must follow. It is not a surprise that our common law shows that the lack of clarity on payment allocation in health services will likely give rise to potential legal challenges. This was seen in Chowlin versus Quebec, highlighting the tension of how unclear responsibility between private and public health care funding can cause legal conflicts. I note well the concerns that were voiced by Senator Gignac. A second apprehension concerns the mandate and composition of the proposed committee of experts. As was stressed by multiple witnesses at committee, transparency and accountability must be vigilantly enforced pertaining to committee membership, conflict of interest, and, perhaps most dangerous, potential industry interference. I endorse Senator Moody's assertion that this bill should properly be viewed as the ground floor, not the ceiling. But it is a beginning, long overdue, desperately needed. And for all the shortcomings in this bill, the NDP and government should be commended for prioritizing contraception medication as an initial class of covered medications. The ability to make informed choices about sexual health and to access adequate sexual and reproductive health services is, theoretically, a basic right in Canada. But, as I regularly reminded my students in human rights, knowing your rights, claiming your rights, and living your rights are, in fact, three different states of being. The truth is that in Canada, even with the legal precedents in place, the lived reality of women, girls, two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people is too often lesser in actuality than the concept of their rights. Their autonomy, safety, self-determination, and ability to make true choices often cannot be lived currently as their rights. Some have been disproportionately impacted. Indigenous women and women with disabilities have faced forced sterilization and forced contraception. Socially marginalized women and those with low incomes experience continued barriers to reproductive health because they can't afford it. Young people have had uneven sexual health education at school. Achieving an inclusive democracy in Canada requires true reproductive justice. This includes access to a full spectrum of supports, including abortion services, birth control, health education, and family planning. Nearly a third of Canadian women have at least one abortion in their lifetime. But access differs wildly depending on who you are and where you live. The evidence clearly indicates that supporting genuine reproductive choice provides a wide range of benefits to society, to children, and to their families. As Senator Coyle noted today, many pregnancies in Canada are unintended. Marginalized and vulnerable populations are overrepresented among those with unintended pregnancies, particularly among those seeking contraception and reproductive health choices. Currently in Canada, safe contraception is often just a dream for many people, including those who are living in northern, rural, or remote locations, of Aboriginal heritage, living with substance use or mental illness, and of lower socioeconomic status. In the absence of a federal drug plan, access to modern, effective, and affordable contraception differs from province to province or territory, despite Canada having a universal healthcare system and a Universal Healthcare Act. Across the country, provinces provide a patchwork of financial supports to access contraceptives, meaning that while targeted vulnerable populations such as young people, low income, and uninsured people may have subsidized access to some form of contraception, financial cost remains the greatest barrier to overall access for Canadians. While financial coverage remains inconsistent, people must rely upon networks of advocacy organizations, such as Action Canada, for trustworthy, evidence-based information on the available forms of contraception in their respective provinces and territories, help on how to obtain them, and be empowered to make choices.
Senator McPhedran, I'm sorry, it being 4 p.m., I have to interrupt. It being at 4 p.m., pursuant to the order adopted on September 21, 2022, I declare the Senate adjourned to Thursday, October 10, 2024 at 2 p.m., the Senate so decreeing. Senator McPhedran.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. I'll just quickly summarize and then go on to the remainder of my speech. As long as financial coverage across Canada remains inconsistent, people must rely upon networks of advocacy organizations, such as Action Canada, for trustworthy, evidence-based information on the available forms of contraceptives in their respective provinces and territories, and be empowered to make the choices that are right for their health. This bill is essential because Canada's patchwork of access to contraception is unsustainable. For example, all provinces and territories have expanded prescribing authority to a wider network of health professionals, including pharmacists, midwives, registered nurses, but only 46% provide financial coverage for all their population. A cross-sectoral, interdisciplinary research project led by the European Parliamentary Forum for Sexual Health and Reproductive Rights with Action Canada and University of British Columbia researchers produced the Global Contraception Policy Atlas to monitor countries on contraceptive policy, education, and access. Per this comparative atlas, British Columbia ranks highest in Canada, while Newfoundland and Labrador ranks lowest, close to my own province, Manitoba, in 10th place. Bill C-64 intends that Canadians will have access to a comprehensive suite of contraceptive drugs and devices, meaning that some 9 million Canadians of reproductive age will gain reproductive autonomy, bringing down the cost barrier that is unevenly borne by women and gender-diverse Canadians. According to UBC researchers, contraception medications can cost more than $19,000 over the course of a woman's life. The Canadian Patented Medicines Prices Review Board, the PMPRB, which is mandated to track and monitor that drug prices are not excessive, has stated that Canada currently has the third highest prices globally, and that we also spend more per capita on drugs than any OECD country other than the US. Pharmacare opponents, concerned about a national bulk pricing strategy, often try to downplay this excessive financial burden by citing that Canadian drug prices are simply the median of OECD countries. This is misinformation. Yes, Canada's prices are at the median of the 7 OECD countries the PMPRB uses as comparisons, but these countries represent collectively the highest drug prices in the world. And while we are examining cost, allow me to be frank. The costs in C-64 are going to be less than the costs of doing nothing. Studies show us over and over that free contraception programs save by reducing costs associated with birthing and abortions, in addition to high rates of care needed for postpartum mothers and babies. Opponents of Bill C-64 suggest that universal coverage is unnecessary, claiming that only 3% of Canadians are ineligible for insurance that would cover the cost of prescription medication. This argument comes from an industry-funded report based on data provided by the principal insurance industry lobby in this country that defined as technically eligible private or public drug coverage with high deductibles or costly premiums that many cannot afford. The Conference Board of Canada and other witnesses before Sochi noted that the lobby's 3% figure does not account for the reality of exorbitant drug pricing that makes procuring medications a financial impossibility for upwards of 30% of Canadian households, regardless of whether they are technically eligible for coverage. The UBC Contraception and Abortion Research Team found that 70% face access barriers to contraception. Genuine access to contraception is more than simply a health issue, more than a women's issue. This is about reproductive injustice. From a generation much younger than mine, Megan Dougherty, Director of Global Policy and Advocacy at Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights, the civil society partner of the Canadian Association of Parliamentarians for Population and Development, gave me this commentary to share with you today. When we think about the root causes of the injustice related to gender and sexuality and reproduction, we're really looking at some of the same root causes, which can be understood in terms of patriarchal gender norms, entrenched in all parts of our social, economic, cultural lives, and manifest in laws and policies and budgets. At their heart, what they are designated to do is to create a situation where gender is used to subjugate and exclude and marginalize particular people based on their gender and really elevate and prioritize men, all of the norms associated with masculinity. The idea that all sexuality should be about reproduction, and that translates into real human rights violations, blocking access to sexual and reproductive care that many people need." End of quote. Colleagues, the health, economic, social, and equity impact of free contraception cannot be overstated and benefits everyone. In keeping with Senator Cardozo's helpful historical notes to this debate, I wish to close with a quote from Canada's own esteemed Stephen Lewis, who served in many high-level multilateral posts, including as our ambassador to the UN, as a member of the UN Commission on the Social Determinants of Health. 30 years ago, he said, "A woman's economic well-being, her own health and her children's, her aspirations, her hopes for family betterment, her education, her options for employment or childcare, the wholesomeness of available shelter, food, and water, All these and many more factors will enter into her reproductive choices. A woman's reproductive choice lies at the core of 1,000 influences and pressures. She is palpably the one best equipped to make decisions. Honourable colleagues, let's vote now to support universal pharmacare and to support this bill as the pathway to achieving that goal for all Canadians and a stronger Canada. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.